The next question is from Patrick Glennon. What about the congressional hearings? It's gone very quiet. Look, I know there is a deep mood of despondency right now in UAP social media. Everybody thinks that, look, I have to say, everybody seems to think that the UAP issue is a form of entertainment and there needs to be kind of a weekly rollout of the next best thing. This takes time. I'm not at all deterred or in any way worried about the pace of change. There are enormous things underway in Congress. We've just reported on one of them, the Americans for Safe Airspace Act. That's an incredibly important piece of legislation because what it's going to do is mandate, to some degree, a protection of people in the aviation industry so that they don't suffer retribution for coming forward. I just recently had a pilot visit my home here in Australia who is a pilot for a major airline that does couriers of packages all around the world. Well, I'll leave you to guess who that might be. The pilot described to me an anomalous incident that took place over the Pacific Ocean en route to a particular country. He showed me video of what he'd seen, and he wanted me to know about it because he was concerned that, frankly, he's going to suffer retribution for using his mobile phone camera in the cockpit. Apparently, there are regulations against doing that. So he was worried about losing his job. And for that reason, he hadn't reported what he'd seen to his bosses. And he's even concerned about forwarding it on to the Federal Aviation Authority because then it might blow back on him if they then start investigating. So this is why there are things happening right now in Congress. There are moves afoot to, as well as get this legislation passed, there are still moves afoot for hearings. And there are whistleblowers in the works who are sitting there waiting for approval from DOPSA, the Defence Office Pre-Publication Security Review Team, to make a decision about whether or not they can feel okay about coming forward. These things just take time. It's not a weekly publicity event. You know, we're not going to put out a press release every week telling you what's happening because by its very nature, a lot of this is covert and stealthy. A lot of people are frightened about coming forward, so they're testifying in camera, in secret to congressional committees. But I can tell you there's a lot happening. I'm very optimistic. Finally, the next question's from Will Gallison. It seems the threat must be more insidious than merely losing one's security clearance. He's talking here about the threat to people who are thinking about coming forward, the whistleblowers. He asks, there are surely people who've worked in these legacy programs who've put away enough money to retire and have no need to maintain a security clearance. This has been going on since the 1940s at least, so there must be many people who were involved and who are now in their 70s, 80s and 90s. What do they have to lose? And the answer is not a great deal. You're absolutely right. And a lot of those people have come forward. I'm thinking of Corso. I'm thinking of the people. You've got a former CIA director, Roscoe Hillenkotter, who actually created a UFO advocacy transparency organisation. Throughout history, we seem to forget there have been brave people who've come forward. David Grush is not the first. There have been people who've come forward from within the military, within the intelligence community, who've spoken publicly about what they know. The problem is they get walloped. They get hammered with a massive discrediting campaign. And so there are a lot of people whom I suspect are real, who have come forward with authentic claims, and they've been dismissed because their claims do not get traction. And this brings us back to the good work of people like Congressman Grothman. It's absolutely vital that we all put pressure on our congressional representatives, our senators, our congressmen, our congresswomen, and demand that they keep on asking questions about the UAP issue.
Activity over U.S. military airspace is fueling questions on what's being done to monitor such aircraft. U.S. Air Force officials confirming several unmanned drones flew over Langley Air Force Base in Virginia back in December. It's been brought up at congressional hearings twice just this month alone. In one exchange, Senator Mark Kelly questioned the Joint Chiefs Chairman on why and how these drones got so close to sensitive military airspace. Take a listen.
One of the things we have to continue to work on is to continue to understand the technology that's moving forward and then move at the same pace as it was highlighted. We do have to move faster. And so it's an area that we collectively have to continue to work on, not only here in defense here in the United States, but also at our forward locations where we have many of our service members deployed.
And this issue is the topic of the latest episode of one of our new podcasts. And right now, the link to Reality Check with Ross Coulthart is live. Just take out your phone, scan this QR code right here at the bottom of your screen, or visit News Nation's website or our YouTube page to get that link. But joining me now is Reality Check host and News Nation special correspondent Ross Coulthart. Ross, good to have you this morning. In your latest episode, you interview a witness to the mysterious drones that flew over Langley Air Force Base. Let's take a listen to what he had to say first.
Kind of confirmed to me that it was Langley when I would sometimes see a searchlight that would start flashing from the ground and kind of wave back and forth, never really focusing on any of them as they went past, but just kind of like just waving back and forth. The orbs, I would say, looked about car-sized. I mean, just from that distance. And they kept a very steady pace until they got over that location in which they would start hovering over the base.
Yeah, so Ross, the government says they don't know the origin of these drones, but you see that video we played there to the right-hand side of the screen. What's your take on who could be sending drones over U.S. airspace?
Well, firstly, good morning, Marky. The word they're using is drones, but there's no evidence that these are what we would call commercial or military drones. The witness that I interviewed, Jonathan Butner, he was close enough to see for sure whether there were propeller blades or any kind of propulsion system that was keeping these drones hovering in the air. And as he says, this was car-sized. These were large orange orb objects with no visible means of propulsion. And this isn't just happening at Langley Air Force Base. These incidents are happening all across key military installations and particularly nuclear facilities all across the United States. And I know the Air Force likes to use the euphemism of drones because that offers a palatable possible alternative, that it might be a foreign adversary. But there has been no evidence presented of any foreign adversary being able to deploy drones in what at Langley Air Force Base is one of the most sensitive Air Force bases on the East Coast. This is where we've got F-22 Raptors. This is the forward defense for for Washington, D.C. This is a very, very important military base, and it's quite clear it's not possible to stop these objects from coming into that very, very sensitive military airspace.
Yeah, I know people have floated the idea of this being, sent from China or Russia especially after we saw that Chinese spy balloon just last year. This latest episode also talks about how the Mexican drug cartels are using drones over our southern border. Are drones changing the way American enemies are spying on us?
They are. Indeed, they are. I think the estimation from Northcom's commander has been that there's 1,000 drone incursions alone across the southern border of the United States, particularly from crime cartels in Mexico. And the alarming thing is that there are admissions that these drones are technologies far beyond what the United States is capable of producing itself. They're using highly advanced technology, obviously, to bring in illicit materials, perhaps weapons, perhaps drugs, and this is largely unregulated and unmonitored. It's a huge concern, and we interview Congressman Glenn Grothman in the story, who talks about this as a major issue of concern. What he also raises is concerns, frankly, that we need to ensure that there's greater reporting of anomalous objects that are seen in our skies so that these things are brought to the attention of authorities, because we have a crazy situation where reporting these objects is so stigmatized that pilots don't feel comfortable about coming forward. And there's a laudatory piece of legislation that the congressman is pushing with his colleagues in the House, which will essentially allow pilots to get protections to know that they can come forward to the FAA and other agencies and know that they're not going to suffer harassment or intimidation in their job for coming forward and telling the truth about what they're seeing.
Yeah.
Flu have anything to do with the program David Grush says exists? News Nation's Joe Khalil is here now with more. Joe, there is a tiny credibility question here. The Pentagon has been saying for the past year there was never any such reverse engineering program. Now it says, oh, there was one, but it never really got started.
Yeah, I mean, there were rumors about this program, the codename Kona Blue, for a long time now. And it was only last month that they acknowledged for the first time ever that it existed. Now we are getting an inside look at how this program was propped up. So it's called Kona Blue. It is real. It was a special access program, very highly classified. It was proposed from the Pentagon to the Department of Homeland Security. We now have all of these declassified documents, and in them, it describes the purpose of the program as, and I'm going to quote here, acquiring, studying, and engineering technology that the U.S. got from UAPs, or UFOs. In the documents, it refers to them as AAVs, Advanced Aerospace Vehicles. Ultimately, the program was scrapped by the Department of Homeland Security, but not before years of planning went into it from the Pentagon, and it describes in detail how they stood the program up. They set a budget, $12 million to $15 million the first year, going all the way up to $50 million down the road. And the program in these documents now also makes specific reference to locations in Nevada where some material may be housed. It also references recovered UAP material, personnel with knowledge of recovered technology, and also personnel who know of the whereabouts of this. And just lastly, if you think this sounds too sci-fi, or that this was maybe one or two rogue employees at the Pentagon, in these documents it also shows that the Undersecretary of Science and Technology signed off on this program and approved it, saying in these documents that it was a necessary step for national security. So all of that is in here now. We did get a response from the Department of Homeland Security today, and they said simply, quote, while this program was considered under a prior administration, it was never fully established by the Department of Homeland Security. DHS has released these classified documents consistent with its commitment to transparency. So, Elizabeth, it looks like we now have some very clear specifics about what was in this, at least proposal for this plan from the Pentagon.
Wait, you mentioned some budget figures there in the tens of millions of dollars. Was that money ever spent? Was money ever spent on Blue Kona?
I don't believe the money was spent. The money was effectively sort of earmarked within the DOD's budget, or the Pentagon's budget, but the program, to my understanding, was scrapped before that money was spent, because it was allocated specifically for year 1, year 2, year 3, and year 3 being an expectation for what they would need at that point.
And what do we make of the fact that they keep talking about locations in Nevada and material being housed in Nevada? What is that a reference to?
Yeah, that was really interesting. So it was referencing locations where the program was scoping out for if they had recovered these types of material or pieces of a recovered vehicle, where they may be housed, where they may be kept. They were bringing on a scientific team to study and do that kind of thing. So they were literally already scoping out locations where that type of work was going to happen. And it's all laid out there in these now declassified documents, right in black and white.
All right. Joe Khalil reporting live from Capitol Hill. Thanks so much. News Nation's special correspondent Ross Coulthart. What's your reaction, Ross, to these declassified, now newly declassified documents in Kona Blue?
Good evening, Elizabeth. Well, look, it does sound sci-fi, but I can tell you there are people inside the Defense Department, former and serving, who do believe that the claims made in the Kona Blue documents were authentic. But that's vigorously disputed, of course, by the ARROW, the Pentagon's UAP investigation team. They did their historical review and published a few weeks ago, and they said, yes, there was this codename Kona Blue program that was proposed, never implemented, but proposed as a special access program, one of the deepest, darkest secrets in the US government. And they claim at ARROW that, of course, they investigated and they found no evidence to support claims of retrieved non-human technology. All I can tell you, Elizabeth, is that we now have a very clear difference of opinion inside the Defence Department and also inside the intelligence community. Because one of the things that's conspicuous, ever since that Arrow historical report was published a few weeks ago, which refuted Kona Blue's documents and said that there was nothing in the whole program, the allegations were based on false premises. What's been conspicuous is that the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, the intelligence czar that was appointed post 9/11 to centralise and control intelligence in the United States, they haven't backed the Pentagon's claims in the Arrow report.
Have they contradicted them, or are they just not commenting?
They're just not commenting. And it's very interesting because I'm told there is a split between the intelligence community and the Defence Department. The Pentagon's decided to bluff it out and go it alone. There are people who are passionately of the view that there is authentic, recovered, non-human technology in the possession of the United States, and they are determined to get access to it so that its utility can be exploited, weapons can be developed, technologies can be advanced to the benefit of the American people. The problem is there's a group inside the Pentagon, they believe, who are blocking access to this technology, and that's what the decision to not make Kona Blue a special access program was all about. This was an attempt by a group of committed people inside the Pentagon who do believe this technology exists to try and make sure that they did everything properly by the book, by the law.
Is it
and
possible,
unfortunately, they were blocked.
Ross, is it possible that David Grush might have conflated? I mean, was it Kona Blue that he was talking about, or was he talking about a completely different program?
I'm sure the Pentagon would love you all to believe that David Grush is a deluded person who has no idea what he's talking about. And that's certainly the line they're pushing at the moment. What I can tell you is that there is an abundance of independent, objective witnesses who back what David Grush says to the hilt. And this is slowly going to come out, whether the Pentagon likes it or not. And unfortunately, we have a situation now where the government is actively being, I believe, misled by people in the Pentagon who have determined to try and cover up and deceive the American public.
Ross Coulthart, how did they come up with Kona Blue? Like, how's that a nickname for a top secret program to reverse engineer? I mean, I always wonder how they do that. Ross, great to have you on the show. As always, we will continue to cover this as more documents are declassified and we read them. Thanks so much.
No worries. Thank you.